My iridescence thumbnail is still gone. I didn't take it down. Brockhampton is back with a new album titled Ginger, the worst type of human being on the planet. And I gotta say, listening to Brockhampton has been a very interesting experience, given how much they've evolved over time. While there were topics in the Saturation series that I was a big fan of in the entire trilogy in itself, I gotta say, comparing it to their new stuff, the Saturation series in itself seems a lot more immature. And that's not a bad thing. But if we're talking topically, if we're talking evolution, I think the group has become stronger in Amir's absence. But in all honesty, Amir wouldn't fit over their style now. Like, he wouldn't, in my opinion, be useful over Brockhampton the way they are now. I think that absence has made other members of the group, you know, come into their own a little bit more, when I felt maybe in Saturation they were a bit more muted or toned down. So I really am excited to see where they go with this new project, Ginger. I've talked enough. Let's jump into it. Track number 1 is titled No Halo. I'm into it. Yeah, I feel like Matt's just completely coming to his own.
Taking everything from pies and pans and fans and cold now. Everything except the doubt. Running out of options.
What is this humming? Oh my God, Kid Cudi, is that you? See, that Merlin, I don't think we would have gotten on earlier work, and like channeling his inner, you know, Cudi influence with the humming.
No one help me with my eyes go red.
I was just like Cudi right now.
No one help me with my eyes go yeah.
Big fan of that first track. It reminds me of like some early NSYNC. I love how, like I said, this whole time they've always come across like an actual boy band. You know, Merlin, I think, dominated this track. He was definitely a starlight for me, especially with his vocals and how animated he generally is. He was a lot more consistent vocally here, and the humming, the guitar acting as a foundation for this track, and then their voice kind of being laced in between the strings. I think that was perfect. And the track like grows while you're listening to it. It sounds really simple in the beginning, but then it just kind of grows more instrumentally by the time you get to the closer. And based on what they're talking about, all I can assume is that they're saying they're not perfect and they're trying to find their way. That's all I can assume. The next track is titled Sugar. I've heard this track before. So what you get for listening to leaks, bitch. What I'll do is I'll buy the song and then I'll stream it like 5 to 10 times. It's fine. This track leaked like probably 3 months ago, and when I first heard it, I was in love with that hook, with that chorus. It was beautiful. Kind of fucked up because on my phone I titled the track Alone, but on the actual song it's called Sugar. It's another track that uses, like I said, heavy emphasis on those strings. Just the acoustics, I think, is what they're the most natural way that they can be interpreted. I feel like that's what they're going with. Next track is Boy Bye. Yeah. What the fuck is that? God, this is fantastic. Alright, y'all gotta help me out because I don't know what instrument that is, but I don't know what the strings are for that, because that is fantastic. They're definitely thick.
I've been behaving,
Oh man, that track shouldn't be so short. And for me, like I said, the subject matter here is just so much more aware and just mature than their previous. You can tell they knew a lot less coming in and they know a lot more now. And that's indicated through their lyrics, through their self-awareness, what they refuse to do, what they refuse to put up with, and where they know they came from. Dom honestly dominates his verse in the beginning. Like, he's the starlight for this track for me. But in totality, the track, you know, is just amazing, you know, and they've used this guitar and these strings for the first 3 songs so far. Track number 4 is Heaven Belongs to You.
Hoping you can only repent. Dead leaves in the breeze, sweep your chin.
It sounds like that one Jaden Smith song. I don't remember what it was. I can't remember the name of it. Somebody put it in there, but it sounds like that Jaden Smith song.
I woke up more of pain and torture what I bring to these. And there's a war. I didn't get the memo, didn't CC me.
Is that Slow Tie? It sounds like Slow Tie. I swear to God, if that's Slow Tie, this album's getting a Grammy from me.
Backwards.
Oh my God.
Backwards, I don't smoke backwards.
This is great.
What you saying? Why you praying for forgiveness?
That's definitely Slow Tie. I don't give a fuck. If you heard his album Nothing Great About Britain, he's like rapping in a similar fashion, because like he's always so against, he's always so rebellious with his verses. He's always so rebellious and like against the establishment, so to speak. in a lot of what he raps, and here it's really no different. Again, with this one, I think what he's trying to reference again here is like just these things already belong to you in a way. Like if you want these things, go get them, go attain them. I think if he does have a belief in any deity, he's trying to bring him down much more to eye level as opposed to the glorification of, you know, religion or, you know, certain practices that you need to abide by in order to become successful. Track number 5 is Saint Percy. I knew one track was gonna have some massive bass. Come on, just kill me with it.
Bang, hanging on your speaker, banging on your speaker, baby. Need to find the reason, make you believe it. Police pull up on me, boy, I kept that cold shoulder.
See, this is what I mean, because why am I getting a notification from Apple Music? Fuck out of here. I don't want when people think, when I say that these instrumentals are like more laid back, they're more subtle, but there's just as much going on. I can't name like every little thing or detail that I'm hearing right now, but there's so many little additions that are so subtle that most people aren't probably going to notice if you only are a fan of their, if you're only a fan of them for Saturation, because the beats were so much more in your face, more obvious, and they were so much more loud. Here, they're a lot more toned down, subtle, almost a lot more charming in a way, because these little additions in totality don't make or break the tracks. They're not the foundation for them, but they're still really important and they're nice to hear. How did they just transition that smoothly? How? What the fuck? Just punkin' niggas. I just realized I was I said Blueface. I just realized I was Bareface. I've been waiting for this dude to have a verse that was mean for so long, and he finally gave me one. Hard to explain my excitement and joy for that track, but it just is what it is. It's very Southern inspired too. Reminds me of like some D4L, some Southern crunk or Southern snap rap. I think their verses are put together really well too, because vocally they're not too far away from each other. It's almost, I mean, you could tell that there are different people coming in at certain moments, but it's almost like the tone of them all is the same. Track number 6, If You Pray Right. This is the one I think I heard. I wasn't a big fan of this track. Their flows and these horns. Okay, this was the wrong track. I'm thinking of the other track. I'm thinking of I've Been Born Again. I actually did like If You Pray Right. And it took me a while for this track when it came to the messaging in it, and also the latter part of it, which I also think is great. You are going to be kind of floored and impressed with Dom's verse. I've interpreted his verse so many different ways in the very beginning, and I really think this is one of the best verses he's ever written for the group. I'm big on anyone who mentions Haile Selassie, much like Bob Marley, much like Lupe Fiasco, that have made tracks referencing them. He uses him as an example, at least from my interpretation, as what might be viewed as a deity. He uses Islam, he uses Buddhism, and many others, and he starts off with this as a foundation for what his verse is going to be. Then we get to a point in his verse where he says that prerequisites are irrelevant, meaning that that entire list of names and religions and beliefs that he just mentioned in the beginning don't mean anything. And again, this is how I feel about it. You might feel different. He might intend for this to be interpreted differently, but at least for me, it just means that this stuff doesn't mean anything. You walk on your own 2 feet. I also feel like this is further when Kevin Abstract is saying that he can help his city out. It's almost like continuing the idea of why leave it to a deity when I can do something about it myself. Again, track-wise, I just think the music here that we're getting from them is much more mature than what it used to be, and that's what I kind of like about them now. Like I said, I've heard this track before, and next track is Dearly Departed.
This is just ask for Alexis. Can Jesus send me a message? Who am I? Who am I? Why I hide?
Oh my God, this is fantastic. Oh, it's in me now. Got that blues to it. It's a little funky and groovy, and it's got soul as a foundation. It's over.
Hard to endure. Where's my stamina in his life? Make sure my family tight. More movies on my dad, got my back. My sister graduated. Not
dude, it's what?
Little kid, I know the one who pulled the strings was once on my side. Motherfucker!
He dropped the mic and stormed out the fucking studio. Yo, that electric guitar in the back, the amplifier, the synth, like Dearly Departed. I'm sorry, it's hands down. This might be the track. I won't say it's the best track they've ever made, but this is gonna probably be the track that I return to very frequently. I don't know, most of what I get from this track, at least for me, the way it speaks to me is more in the sense that you don't have any time. I just love how unfiltered Dom is still, you know, because for people who don't know, like a while ago, I remember him saying something about Amir setting up one of his homies to be robbed. And I mean, I guess he kind of alludes to that with this track, and just how having to cut people off and how ending relationships feels like them dying in a way. And I mean, it's a strong message, knowing the foundation of what it was for me when I started listening to their music. It seemed like a collective, a complete brotherhood, Amir included. And so that breakup is like, I feel like he's like dead to me now. You know what I mean? At least to them. And that, you know, is something that I'm sure most of the people listening can relate to. But the ambiance of this track and just the foundation and I guess the aesthetic around it is what helps push its message so much more, because it's so painful. It's so wrapped up in kind of confusion, but also anger. It's honestly like preparing for a funeral. This track is honestly like prepping yourself and getting your black outfit ready to go and see the wake. As this person is laying in that casket and they can no longer respond to what you're saying, you're just left with all these emotions and you need to get it out. And it's like you're yelling at them while they can't respond to you. And it's like, you're already dead to me. You're already finished. Like, I just need to get it out anyway. Track number 8 is I've Been Born Again. This was the track that I didn't really love too much, mainly because of the pitching of Joba's voice. I felt like if they probably could have led into it, you know, as opposed to like starting with his voice like that, altered the pitch at some moments through the song, it would have been more quote unquote acceptable or better for me to listen to. But, you know, since Joba's verse took up a good portion of the song, that was kind of iffy for me. So I was a little bit off on this track. I didn't really love it. Track number 9 is Ginger. Nah, my nigga. Yeah, I'm not really feeling this track. You know, the auto-tune, the vocal effects, the patterns, the beats, really, I'm not a fan of it. It don't work for me, my guy. I don't get why they did that to Bareface's voice when Bareface can actually sing. Like, he can actually give a good harmony to a track by himself without the effect. Track number 10 is Big Boy. Why, man? Why? Big boy, you a big boy now. I'm a big kid now.
Lost cause and a lost child. Lost my way trying to change for the wrong crowd. Build me up, hold me down, let's air it out.
Yeah. Hey, man, Joe was hitting me like early Eminem right now. And he doesn't sound like him, but I mean, vocal inflection wise, he reminds me of him. He's giving me that similarity in intensity that early Eminem did. And I really like that. Not only from that, but also just his subject matter. Like, he's so self-aware, self-deprecating, and just extremely, just brutally honest with himself, whether it's good or bad. Those were all things that I got from early Eminem. Alright, so I can see this track probably growing on me in the future, but as of right now, I'll say this track easily could have just been Joba's interlude and maybe had a Bareface attachment, and I'd have been fine with that. Or maybe just had Matt Champion, Bareface, and Joba on it, and it could have just been like, oh shit, introspection. Oh my god. I know I'll get addicted to that hook. That big boy, I'm a big boy now. I know I'm gonna get addicted to that. But the track in itself, I think Joba has such a starlight performance that the others just kind of fall short for me, to the extent that they're not really necessary. And his intensity is so much more impactful than theirs is. So I just only need him. Track number 11, Love Me for Life. No.
Homie, don't play, no. Taking my day slow.
Joba's really showing his versatility, man. It's just so fucking fluid. Listen to him, man. He's that nigga, bro. You're gonna have a favorite, right? And then you've still got to remember the other ones bring that entertaining quality to their verse as well. Merlin still comes in. Bareface still comes in. I think Kevin Abstract is a little too monotone in the beginning for me to enjoy. But Joba completely saves it again. Like, again, his voice, and he's just extremely versatile right now. And like I said, those harmonies, even while he's keeping a consistent flow, those harmonies that he's going with are just perfect. They just work. Obviously, if they're talking about darker subject matter, their tone isn't going to be the happiest or the brightest. I get that, but you know, I still think being able to express it in a way that is enjoyable is an important aspect of even dark subject matter, and I think Joba does that perfectly on this track. Last track is Victor Roberts.
Looking for great dope. My papa looking at my mama looking at that closet like that shit.
Oh my God. Y'all need to let me know what that final track, that final vocal, who that was at the very end. I know Bareface definitely did his thing, but I need to know, like, who, everybody together, I'm not 100% sure. I did forget to also mention Deb Never. I feel like I'm on 88 Risin's payroll, but I forgot to mention Deb Never was on that track. No Halo as well. Given as the female vocalist, and I really enjoyed her contribution as well. There are a couple of collaborations that are like hidden on this album, it seems, and you know, some of them are noticed and some of them aren't. Slow Tie, I was really surprised with. I did not expect him to show up on this record at all. I'm not confirmed that he's on the record, but I'm pretty sure he's on the record. But that was Brockhampton with Ginger, and I definitely like this more than Iridescence. For those that were probably unaware, Iridescence struck me as a much sharper downhill tone and energy because of, I don't know if it was specifically geared toward the absence of a mirror back then, but comparing Iridescence immediately after Saturation, you're going to get, you know, harsher opinions on the album, I feel, because of such a shift in momentum and shift in energy. Iridescence is just a much more toned down project, in my opinion, a lot more emotional. But I feel on this album, they've got a good balance of emotional depth and also their own stories interlaced and woven into the project, even for members or people that are coming in that don't know them that well. I think this is going to illustrate more of who they are, much more than their Saturation Trilogy did. And that was, like I said, one of my issues with Saturation series was, despite me loving it so much, it still felt like a strong lack of identity, possibly due to there being so many members, or possibly due to their wanting to be like an inclusion of everyone on the tracks. I guess I feel like this album's more mature just because it feels so much more substantive than their previous work. I think each member has definitely come into their own much more. There's literally zero confusion as to who's rapping and when, and I could attribute that to being more into their lore and being into the group as a whole, as far as sticking with their projects since 2016, 2017, but refining themselves to the degree that you really can't mistake who's rapping and when, despite there being so many members, is a testament to how much they've grown and just honed in on their sound. The initial 7 tracks on this project are fantastic to me. I think it gets a little rough and shaky around I've Been Born Again with Ginger. I think that's just a track that's not for me. I just don't like it at all. And Big Boy is kind of hit or miss. I feel like there are more elements to that track that I like than I dislike. But regardless of those tracks that aren't really the best on this project, there's always a redeeming quality about them. You know, something I notice about this album is how frequently religion comes up, how frequently their ideas of growing up comes up, them leaving things behind, them feeling like they've been born again. Funny enough, Born Again comes after the track Dearly Departed. And Brockhampton definitely experienced a rebirth after Amir's absence. There's a subtle sense of somberness on this album that didn't accompany Saturation at all. Almost like that feeling of graduating high school or graduating college and you leaving behind people that you may have grown up with, come up with, and entering a new lifestyle, a new business, a new chapter. It seems despite growing in success and despite growing in popularity, there is still a feeling of leaving something behind. These tracks are definitely so much more intimate. In a lot of ways, the toned down instrumentals help them explain themselves more by not having these really distractive, abrasive beats. I can say to their detriment, they may not be aware that not everyone is going to be interested in what they're talking about. What they're talking about may not move every person, and it might not be that important to them. Like the final track here, it comes from an artist that most people, myself included, have no clue about. So hearing him isn't like fuck you, but it's like I don't know you. 2 things that I also notice about this project is how frequently it deals with coming up, dealing with these newfound issues now that they have this newfound fame, and then also struggling with I mean maybe belief in deities or belief in religion, because at least as far as I'm concerned, It would seem that the more you start packing on, the more you would need help to manage it. And I don't know in a lot of ways if they're trying to say we don't need God or we do, and we're struggling with trying to figure out in what areas. I mean, the first track opens up with them basically saying that we're no angels, we need direction too. This is definitely one of those albums that their hardcore dick riders are going to say is imperfectly perfect, but that is kind of a vibe that I'm getting from it. Not really being too upset with your imperfections and struggling with them, not knowing what the overall outcome is going to be. They live in the present very frequently on this project, and very rarely do they go into too many topics going into the future, and I like that about them. Right now with Brockhampton and their Ginger album, I can say I still really enjoyed majority of what they had to say and put out on this album. Really impressed with how they shifted their sound. You let me know how you felt about this album in the comment section down below, and I'll see y'all next time. I'm out. Peace.